It's a dead man's party. And who could ask for more, Matt?
Well, a necromancer. You can never make too many friends.
That's a good point. And tonight, we'll show you how to make your own custom undead.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblin's Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're talking about custom undead.
that's right. Custom undead are fun. Custom undead are spooky. And custom undead are very good for this type of Halloween theme that we're going for.
Absolutely.
And of course, what better thing to have than a nice fat bag of candy corn? So curl up with your bag, give a listen to us. But before we get into all of the custom undead, first hit the like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're not, Matt, what do we do?
Well, if you're listening to the show, you could do us a favor and give us a review on iTunes or Podchaser.
That's right. Gets the word out, gets more people to check us out, and of course, gives you updates when more awesome episodes come your way.
Indeed.
All right. Let's get into the meat of all of this because...
and bones.
Yes, the meat and bones, because we're talking about custom undead here. Now, why are we doing custom undead? We've kind of alluded to a few reasons, and the first reason is what, Matt?
'Tis the season.
Yeah, it's Halloween.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We do spooky things. Last year, we did a whole bunch of games you guys should try, like 10 Candles.
Indeed.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, Dread. Undead are iconic, and customizing undead to fit your campaign is a great way to throw a little bit of a horror element. If nothing else, freak out your players who think they know everything.
More flavor is more better. That's something we preach all the time.
All about that flavor.
Yep. And realistically, sometimes vanilla undead does not cut it for the scene that you are trying to set.
Yeah, you could throw some zombies at somebody, but what about some zombies that explode into a burst of poison? That's much more fun.
Sure.
Or zombies that catch fire when you accidentally light them. Continue to burn. Maybe put you on fire.
Could be.
Or, I don't know, some Sons of Caius that wiggle into your brain and make more undead. I always loved those undead. And not a lot of love, the Sons of Caius. If you don't know what those things are, go look them up. They're really neat. They're basically skeletons with worms crawling all over them.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah,
right there.
That's some nasty stuff is what it is. Always horrible because they burrow into your brain and turn you into one of them.
Kind of was D&D's method of creating a zombie apocalypse option, right? Because in D&D, zombies aren't infectious. Make your zombies infectious.
Make your zombies infectious. Now, tonight we have, obviously, options to create your own custom undead, but we also have...
What, like 5 or 6 custom undead that we've already created?
Yep. And you are free to use them in your campaign however you like. Edit them if you want. We don't care.
Right. The whole purposes of this episode is for customizing things, so do what you need to do.
Do what you need to do. So, speaking of doing what we need to do, how do we start the doing, Matt? You've got this idea for custom undead. How do you create them?
The first thing you realistically have to decide is, how did the creature become undead?
Yes. And what we're talking about here is circumstance of death.
Right. Were they created as an undead, or was it a circumstance of their death? So if you died in battle and some necromancer rolls up and they're like, flavorful zombies. Well, that's how you were created.
Mm-hmm.
But there are undead that are created just naturally due to the specific circumstances of their death, like the drown.
Yeah, or going back to the Battleborn undead? I don't remember the name of it, but the ones that rise by themselves in a battlefield, same area, different circumstance.
Yep.
Right? You rose because you were so pissed off that you died. You can come back and take some vengeance, right?
Sure.
Whereas you figured you were going to Valhalla because you died, and then some asshole comes along and says, "Rise, my children." And now you've got to do the truffle shuffle for eternity.
Exactly. There are a few ways to go about this, and here's some of the things you should probably consider. Right?
And these are not an exhaustive list. We're giving you the Cliff Notes version, of course.
Sure. Question 1, how did the creature die?
Can you flavor the description and the abilities to reflect how the creature died?
If something was burnt alive, right? I mean, just incinerated nearly. Then even if it's a skeleton, the bones should be charred.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that.
Cloud of ash maybe follows it along as it shuffles along the ground.
That actually would be a great description, right? A charred skeleton that is surrounded by a cloud of ash and smoldering sparks.
Pissed off expression. Want to turn up the heat?
Give me a light.
Yeah.
You got me with that one.
Yeah, that's, well, you know, a little StarCraft reference is always a wonderful thing. Place is a big thing. And again, if you're wondering, these are all description based. Guess what? Describing your undead is what's going to give its abilities. So where? Where was the specific place the type of undead was created, right? So you mentioned the drowned is a good example. They
Sure.
obviously are an ocean type of undead.
Or swamp.
Or swamp.
Yeah,
Yeah, drown in the swamp. That's a more.
That's a paladin undead right there.
That's true. Yeah, he's got shining armor and everything. Nothing but a couple of bites taken out of him from the bullywugs.
Oh, yeah.
Damn paladin always drowns. We should make a drowned paladin. We
Sure.
didn't. We somehow I missed that in this episode. I'm sorry, guys. That's my fault.
So what's the mental or emotional state of the creature when it died?
Banshees are a great example.
They're sad.
Yeah.
Desperately woeful.
Spirits of sorrow.
Yep.
But you can have any type of emotional state. And in fact, in one of our custom undead, we have one for you.
Revenants are very upset.
Very pissed off.
They are somewhat irate.
Yes, just a bit, right? How powerful was the creature before it died? So this is a fun mechanic to play with somewhat in a story base. If the big bad evil guy is 3rd level and dies, that's a different power base than if he was 20.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's not going to be the typical zombie, right?
Absolutely.
Zombie lord at the very least.
And, we keep referencing creature as well. We don't say human, elf, whatever. Because you and I both play with animate dead can apply to creatures other than just humanoids.
Of course.
Rules is written. That's great if that's what you want to do at your table. It's not what we do at ours.
Undead myconids be fun.
Yeah.
The undead Tarisk.
And
think about that.
Undead chimera.
Undead chimeras are great. Yeah. I'm still thinking about the undead Tarisk.
Sure. That's because you want to kill it and then force it to come back.
You imagine it would be like a skeletal rancor just stomping along, fury of vile destruction.
Yeah. Animate a couple of dragon's heads to put on its shoulders so that it can be like an undead Godzilla.
That would be kind of cool. I could see also just this badass necromancer making a flail out of Dracolich heads for the Tarisk. Maybe nunchucks. Yeah.
Sure.
One fire and one ice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it would be a Tarisk, an undead Tarisk with monk skills and some Dracolich nunchucks. You're welcome, folks. Anybody planning that epic level campaign, that's what you got to go fight. There you go.
The Terra Lich.
Yeah, the Terra Lich. We've delivered.
I'm going to cut us back to the chase a little bit. Does your undead have magic?
Magic means a whole different thing. And that can apply accordingly, whether it's arcane versus warlock magic versus divine. Yeah. Or, and going back to 3rd edition, like psionics, right?
Yeah.
What kind of flavor of magic? Now, it may all be arcane or divine, but an undead bard is way different than an undead cleric.
Absolutely.
In mechanics, and mostly just flavor, right?
An undead sorcerer is going to be incredibly different than either of those as well.
Absolutely. And so think about how those circumstances create the undead. Now, if it's a created undead via a necromancer, we've got some options as well, story-wise, too.
One of the things you should think about, perhaps, is what rituals did the creator perform? For example, was it drained of blood? If it was, then maybe this creature would crave blood.
And there's specific undead that are like that. Like one of them was what are they called? Skin kites, where they were peeled, the skin was peeled off and just cast. Yeah, they were flayed, and that skin animated and became really pissed off and skins everything else.
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of a cool way to create stuff, right?
Sure. Something else to think about, though, is for what reason was it created?
So was it a guardian? Was it for terror tactics? Was it a shock troop?
Because all of those are going to have very different physicalities, very different imagery to put forward, right? An undead giant is not a spy undead.
No. It's a siege.
Yeah.
It's something for Warcraft there, right?
Sure.
And what we're saying is that, as we mentioned before, all undead have a story in their creation. What is that story? Come up with the story first. If you can come up with the story first, you've pretty much got your undead in the bag.
100%.
It's that simple. You do the story first, and then you play with the mechanics. We're not trying to beat a dead horse here or beat an undead horse here, but it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, you've got your story, Matt. You've got like a little bit of a theme. You might even have thought some powers. What do we do after that?
You just assemble it, right? Put it together. Get your description together first.
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to figure out how you're going to describe it to your players and write that out.
Yeah. And so what we mean by that is custom creatures should have some sort of description that gets a reaction from the players. It's not a huge thing if you're like, this creature shuffles along, yada, yada, yada. Okay, it's a zombie, right? Well, maybe it looks like a zombie, but it's not a zombie. Give them something that evokes a bit of fear. Undead are supposed to be scary.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's crawling along on arms that are clearly been gnawed apart by some wild animal. And as it shuffles along, it leaves a trail of rot and blood. Now, that's a different visceral image, right?
Sure.
Got an unholy light in its eyes.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is if you want to make your players recognize that an undead is not the bog standard version of something it otherwise resembles, make its eyes, make any part of it glow. Any part of it. Doesn't matter. Its toes can glow. Your players are going to recognize. Zombies don't have glowing toes.
And with the zombie glows green, could be nuclear, guys. I'm just saying.
Nuclear zombies.
Nuclear zombies are fun.
From outer space.
Yes, absolutely. Now, you've got that basic description. You've got this idea behind everything in terms of abilities and stuff like that. Let's talk about some stats. Let's talk about abilities.
Yeah. There's a lot of places online that allow you to build custom monsters in a standard stat block format.
Yep.
Using them allows you to see everything at a glance in the way that you're used to seeing monster stat blocks.
Yeah, and there's a lot of online apps you could go use. We recommend several. If you're interested, hit us up.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to recommend a few. But what you're looking for is something you can look at a glance. It doesn't have to be fully fleshed out if you're creating your custom undead, unless you want to publish it.
Sure.
In which case, great, go for that. But you want enough, again, we're looking at bullet points here. How fast is it? How much damage does it do in general? Because you're going to tailor that to the CR of your players as well.
Absolutely.
And then what you're looking for after that is tailoring the powers to the method of its death. Again, going back to that overall description and theme and story.
Another thing you have to think about, once you have the description down, once you have the stats and abilities down, is the personality or tactics of the creature. Because if it's intelligent, then it's going to have both of those. How do those present themselves?
Yes. So a good example of that is it a maniacally laughing murderer? Maybe as it's cutting off somebody's face, it's, why the long face as it stretches the skin?
Sure. Go back to the bard, right? You could have somebody that's this smoothly urbane, like seductive, kind of Bram Stoker's Dracula-ish kind of character who is undead. Maybe they're an assassin.
Could be. Maybe they are a creature that died from loss or sorrow and like the ghost of a child, right?
Yeah. All of those are intelligent, but all of them are going to present very differently.
And when we're talking about mindless undead as well, you have to consider how literal can you make these creatures. So in many editions, it was like, go do this, and you basically give them a one-word sentence and they would do it.
Right.
Eternally.
Yeah.
But you can also kind of fiddle with that a little bit. Maybe they will do different things if you don't tell them not to.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll go murder people unless you tell them not to murder people because they're evil.
Yeah.
Or maybe you give them a task and they do it in the most malicious way possible because they're animated by evil spirits.
Or simply because they don't like you.
Yeah, they hate the living.
Right. Or if you're the person that created them, they literally hate you specifically.
Because they're pissed off. And
right. They didn't want to come back. They didn't ask for this.
Could have been in the afterlife having a cold beer. Instead, I'm sitting here building some damn pyramid for your stupid arcane ritual.
And here's something else to think about that you literally just touched on. If an undead was purposefully created to be a construction undead,
mm-hmm.
and you give it an instruction, and the necromancer dies, how big is this building? Is this necropolis? Is this whatever, right?
Still keep building.
Because they're just going to build eternally.
Sure.
That would be a hilarious plot point, right? There's, the city.
This unexplored continent from thousands of years. Yeah, people died out long ago. There's a necropolis that some undead lich gave just a whole bunch of skeletons, right? Some skeletons, maybe some semi-intelligent, there's some vampires.
City
some
planners.
Ghouls. Yeah, some city planners, something like that. And they just plan it out, and it just keeps getting built. And when the adventurers finally discover this new continent, it's like a mile high.
Oh, see, I was literally thinking that it happened like 20,000 years ago, and the continent is a city.
Oh, an entire continent that's a city?
Yeah.
I love that. I was thinking in the opposite direction where they were building straight
went
up. They just kept building straight up, and it reached the moon.
Nice.
And so you have a pathway to the stars because a bunch of undead just built a really tall
building.
tower. Yeah, Tower of Babel, guys. That's kind of cool. How does it fight? Whether if it's intelligent, it's probably going to have tactics.
Yeah.
And if it's intelligent, it might have class levels.
It should have class levels.
It should have class levels. You're welcome.
This is a horse we will continue to beat,
I've
no
got
matter how dead it gets.
Right here that I will stand on and tell people.
Monsters with class levels.
Monsters should have class levels. Give them class levels, right? If it's not, then it might have simple tactics. And this is useful for the PCs as well, because if I know I'm going after a bunch of skeletons, they're probably going to bum rush me.
Sure.
And so, particularly in like low-level campaigns, stuff like that, you want your player characters to win for the most part. And so give them ways to defeat these creatures as well.
Something else you can think about as far as how does it fight? If a necromancer has animated animals,
mm-hmm.
let them fight just like the animals, and it's not until the players have engaged that they realize that these animals are undead.
Oh, that would be cool.
Right? Alligators are ambush predators.
Sure.
The alligators attack, the players start to attack back, and that's when they realize that they're zombie alligators or skeletal alligators or what have you. Because until they rush out of the water, how would you know?
Ankylosaurus comes stomping at you, and you dive out of the way, and you chuck a spear into the Ankylosaurus, and you realize
it
goes right through it because it's rotten. And you're like, damn, I got to deal with an undead Ankylosaurus. And there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex right behind me.
And you're actually just in the middle of their eternal battle.
And he's a ghost. And so you're equally screwed on both sides, right?
It's just a bad day.
Bad day, guys. A lot of fun. Oh, man, I want to throw that at my players sometime. Be a lot of fun. Lastly on that, we also have some quirks.
And quirks are simple things that are basically hints about either who the creature was, who created the creature, or any plot-related points that you want to kind of slide in there, if there are any that you want to.
Comic relief also.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Maybe the zombie that's shuffling along, one of them's got just a crazy hat. He's got a golf cap, right?
Yep.
He's got some golf clubs.
Might have a top hat that just keeps reanimating it.
Yes, the hat that maintains.
Indeed.
Give him quirks. We like quirks with magic objects. Quirks for undead are always fun. Maybe this one undead just can't stop dancing. And keep in mind, undead were once people.
Right.
Or monsters.
Yeah.
Some kind of living creature. And so there's nothing to say that it couldn't exhibit the quirks that those NPCs or monsters or animals had. So if the shopkeeper always tapped his foot and you animate him as a zombie, he's going to tap his foot, right?
Right. A zombie could have an eye patch.
And should.
Yeah. It serves no function in one way or the other for a zombie.
Makes him look cool.
But it's just those little tidbits.
It goes with the zombie parrot on his shoulder.
Sure.
Yeah, we be having some zombie pirates. That will be an intelligent undead.
Yeah.
If I were playing.
Captain Malmock. I already have him.
So give him quirks. Speaking of things that are quirky, we've got tonight.
The question of the week.
All right. What's the question of the week? Is it undead related, Matt?
It is somewhat. You've been touched by necromantic powers.
Every day.
What traditional undead ability do you develop?
See, if we were going with me in real life, my luck would be my living ability, which is to kill plants by touch. I have a brown thumb. I can't. Matt understands this. When the pandemic was going on, everyone was building gardens, the big raised gardens and stuff like that, and I grew lots of dirt.
That's not true. You grew some
Onions.
scallions and onions because you
Left them alone.
accidentally left them alone.
Yes.
So you successfully grew onions
By ignoring them.
by ignoring them.
Yes. But otherwise, I kill plants. So I would say that would be a fun one. I would probably, if I were a caster, drain plants like a defiler from Dark Sun.
Sure. I think to me that's more side effect of your undead. I'm talking about like a traditional undead ability, like vampires turning to smoke or turning to mist or whatever.
Oh, so maybe like having like a phylactery or something like that. I could see myself being bound into an object, probably a book, like an entire bookshelf would be my phylactery.
Sure, I can see that. Either a bookshelf or a Crown Royal bag full of dice.
A Crown Royal bag full of dice would be delightful. And I would say if it was a bookshelf, they'd have to read all of the books in order to
Destroy you.
Yeah, just destroying the books, they would reform over time
That's fair.
in a different library someplace else. I would be terrible to destroy.
Or if they attempt to start destroying the books animate and literally fly away.
Yeah, like bats.
Yeah.
Just kind of take off, flapping their wings. I love that. That's a great idea. Yes, I'd say some kind of I'm unable to be destroyed except by destroying my phylactery of whatever it is. What about you? What would you have?
I think you and I both know that my methodology for dealing with pain is to go to sleep in a near comatose state. So I think my methodology, or the undead ability I would pick up, is the Dracula or traditional vampire ability.
Bury yourself in the earth.
Bury myself in the earth until I feel better.
Yeah, I could see that. You just kind of shake yourself off.
Need the soil of my ancestral homeland.
You'd have one hand sticking out of the ground, and it would be clutching a coffee pot.
Sure.
That would be your unholy craving. Would not be blood, but coffee. It would just be coffee.
If I had undead abilities, we both know that Starbucks would cease to exist.
That's a good point, yes. What's your necromantic ability if you were to have one? Hit us up at Goblin's Corner on Twitter, and of course, you can find us on all the social media channels.
Indeed.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about some custom undead.
Okay.
So you've got some stats and abilities. You've got that nice description of how it was created, maybe even why it's so pissed off and wanting to murder the living.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about customizing.
Okay.
A little bit more options, right? Yeah, we could do the standard issue, very descriptive zombie pirate,
Right.
but maybe we want to give the zombie pirate a little bit of flair, right? What kind of flair could we give?
One thing you can always do, which we discuss when we talk about custom monsters in general, is you can always reskin a creature that fits the idea that you have as an undead.
Yes.
So if you want a zombie pirate, then you literally could just take the Corsair stat block and make it undead.
Or you could just choose themed powers from an aquatic adventure
Sure.
and shove them into your undead.
Right.
And we recommend both of those. Or all. Either or all, right?
Right.
One of the things that I would say also is the biggest thing is not necessarily the abilities of the undead, because they're not a bunch of numbers. Undead are tragic. Play up the circumstances of their death.
The thing about undead is like, other than, as you know, the zombie alligators, the thing about intelligent undead is they all had stories. They all got here somehow, and most of them got here involuntarily.
Yes. You can also play up the horribleness of undead. What do we mean by that?
Well, you already mentioned the Sons of Caius, right? Like worms crawling through a skeleton and attempting to turn you into an undead. But most people consider decay relatively gross, especially non-vegetable matter, right? Meat decay is unpleasant.
I'll tell you, that undead cabbage that's rotting, that would suck too.
Yeah, I literally went into sauerkraut and pickles in my head.
Oh, well, okay, maybe not then, right? Yeah, play up the body horror.
Yeah.
You get level drained. What does it do to your character? Maybe it shrivels their skin where they got where they got drained, or maybe their hair turns white. Having characters' physical appearance change because an undead is doing damage to them is something that is horrible, or the actual horribleness of a rotting, fleshy zombie. He's got his intestines hanging out, his doo-doo everywhere. It's nasty.
Yeah, it's
gross.
Unpleasant.
It's unpleasant and gross. Undead are evil as well.
Yes.
This is something you can also lean into, particularly for big bad evil guys.
Yep. Liches are kind of the go-to BBEG, or a go-to BBEG. But Strahd, right? Obviously undead.
Oh, yeah.
Take those out of the picture. You still have other intelligent undead. Mummies would make a great BBEG.
Absolutely.
So kind of cast the net a little wider than maybe the super traditional ones.
And the big thing to think about is that make them do things that living creatures would never do.
Right.
Like, they are evil. They have no problem with sacrificing living creatures. They're not living.
Yeah.
They have no problem of committing atrocities. They don't care.
I will go back to the vampire real quick. They would have literally no problem creating a necropolis wherein every living creature is just cattle.
Yeah.
They don't have any problem with that.
And you can go as dark as you want. Obviously, session 0, all of this.
Yes, of course.
But think about that. Finally, death is not the end of a undead creature. And that's another thing to consider. Liches are a perfect example. You destroy the physical body, they manifest again.
Right.
Ghosts are another good example, too. You could destroy their incorporeal form, but you have to rid the ghost of whatever it was kind of bound to.
Yeah.
So combat may not end the encounter, and that's always a horrible thing for your characters to realize. As they've spent all of their spells, the fighters are down to their last several hit points.
Sure.
They've won, and then the creature reforms before they have a chance to rest.
That's why you do your homework first.
Yeah. So what could it be? Could they be reoccurring villains?
Or in the case of like a ghostly creature, right? This could be a lesson to teach your players about non-combat answers to problems.
Yep.
Because there is no phylactery for a ghost. You either literally solve the problem or the ghost continues to come back.
Now, because we are who we are, we're going to give you a couple of custom undead that we've created this evening. And I think some of these are amusing and some of these are just absolutely horrible.
Sure.
As
is our way.
Like you do. By the way, in case you're interested, there are a couple of creatures that have been created already. Check out some of our custom monster episodes before. More specifically, check out Nonsensical Necromancy. I'm thinking the leg spell, leg lamp, would be a good undead creature just to have as like a pet.
Oh, yeah.
A little bouncing leg lamp. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, go check it out.
Now, we're going to start off with one of your personal creations.
This is an amusing one, but it's pretty awful as well.
So tell me about the Shufflers.
Okay. Necromantic power is not limited to evil tombs and cursed sacrificial altars. Sometimes the death is more insidious, the evil more subtle, The connection to the negative material plane deeper. Sometimes the location is so crushingly awful or boring that to die there creates a new type of undead.
Okay.
As you might have guessed...
So dying during retail.
Yes. Yeah, you see where we're going. As you might have guessed, shufflers are undead who die of boredom and are cursed to give their hard gifts to the living. The psychic drain from these places fuses with the dying corpse to create an animate, negative energy vortex that exists only to cause suffering to others. They're creatures that died of boredom.
Sure. What are some of the environments for that?
Well, they can be born anywhere, but I would say common places shufflers may rise include churches and schools. So study hall is a good example of that. Government buildings.
Fair.
Like the DMV. Car dealerships, because if you ever waited in line to purchase a car, you want to be dead. And timeshare presentations.
All those make sense.
All of those make, yeah, TED Talks probably could also be included in that. I've got a couple of suggested abilities for this horrible animated creature, and let me tell you something, it's not nice.
As it probably shouldn't be.
So first off, it's got the base stats of the former creature, whatever it was. It also has, of course, undead immunities, so throw those into the game. Playing 3rd edition, undead stats. Playing 5th edition, 4th edition, whatever it is, undead stats, right?
Right.
In addition, it's also immune to necrotic damage.
Makes
Some
sense.
undead aren't.
Right.
It has an aura of lethargy.
Okay.
10-foot radius. And this can either or both slow you or put you to sleep.
So basically, sleep on a fail and slow on a successful save.
I think that would work quite well. It has psychic drain. The touch of the shuffler is toxic to living mindsets, and it deals 2d6 points of psychic damage and 2d6 points of necrotic damage to a target.
Okay. That's not good.
It's physically painful to you. It's that feeling when you were a kid.
Physically and mentally, yeah.
Yes. It's that feeling when you were a kid at the mall and your mom's trying shirts on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you're 3.
Yeah.
Dying of boredom. Literally dying of boredom.
So is there anything else it can do other than just touch you to death?
Well, that's pretty nasty, but it has
It
another
is.
touch as well. It's called a corrupting touch, and this is in replacement of the psychic drain that it normally does.
Sure.
As a standard action, a shuffler can drain a magic object or a spell from a living creature, determined randomly. If the item uses charges, it drains a charge. If the item is a continual use item, it renders it inactive for 1d4 minutes.
Unpleasant.
Yeah, and of course, if it's a living creature, it just drains whatever random spell that is, right?
So what does it do with the magic that it steals?
Regardless of the type, whenever the corrupting touch is used, it heals the shuffler up to 1 hit dice worth of hit points.
Okay.
So as a standard action, this thing's rolling along. Oh, and by the way, these things go last in a turn, always.
Like the old zombie rules.
Like the old zombie rules. They always go last because they died of boredom, right?
Right.
So I want you to see this thing shuffling along.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, and it goes, and blam, it hits you with its psychic drain, right? It does some negative damage and some psychic damage. And you're like, damn, that hurt.
It punches you in the brain.
It punches you in the brain. Warrior comes up, strikes it. It grabs the sword, drains it of its magic for 1d4 minutes because it was maybe like a fiery burst weapon or something like that, right?
Sure.
Maybe it goes, smacks the sorcerer. Now he's drained of that spell he used to fly. But it always goes last, guys.
Sure. The sorcerer was smarter. He'd have cast fly and not been within range of it.
I would also say it probably cannot take a double move.
I can see that. Yeah, if it can't attack, then it doesn't get the option to double move. Sure. Yeah. It's called a shuffler. That only makes sense.
It just shuffles along, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of fun. Now you've got one called the Razed Dead.
I do. Because I like buns.
Yes, I was about to say. So tell me about the Razed Dead. What's the description of this thing?
Sometimes people or creatures that were sacrificed in flames to evil powers, or sometimes even overzealous followers of good powers, may return as a boon from fell masters to be controlled by the cultists that sacrificed them, or as a punishment to those who would do evil in good's name.
So they were sacrificed, they came back, they're pissed off, and they're either going to be serving the necromancers or themselves.
Yes. Or serving the vengeance.
Okay, so they're much like revenants.
Yes, similar.
Okay. So what kind of environment are they?
Any place where somebody commits a sacrifice via fire.
Oh, it's specifically in fire.
Yes.
Okay.
It's RAZED, dead.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So some suggested abilities are the Razed have the base stats of the former creature, but the spirit inhabiting it is either evil or vengeful.
Okay.
Additionally, they gain the following abilities. All of the standard undead immunity and resistances.
Yeah, it's undead.
Right. Immunity to fire and either necrotic damage or radiant damage, depending on whether or not it's an evil boon or a divine vengeance.
So if it's coming back to kill the sacrificer, it's got immunity to radiant because it's good.
Right.
And if it's being summoned from the sacrificer to do bad things, it's got immunity to necrotic.
Because it's evil.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I could see that. What else does it have?
They resist non-magical physical damage because they do, because they're better undead. Okay. Also, what I'm calling feed the flames. Being subjected to fire damage heals the Razed 10 points of damage.
Sure. Like you do.
Right. Soul flame. The creature is permanently wreathed in either deep purple and red flames or brilliant gold and blue.
Deep purple or brilliant gold and blue. Cool.
This has two effects. If they take melee damage from a non-ranged weapon, the person wielding that weapon takes 1d4 fire damage and either 1d4 necrotic or radiant, once again, depending on which creature it is.
Very thematic. Right on flavor, right?
And melee attacks are as the base creature plus 1d4 fire and 1d4 necrotic or radiant on a successful hit, depending on, which it is.
Coming back in that sacrificial flame does sacrificial flame damage.
Exactly. And if the creature had multi-attack, it still does.
Nice.
And lastly, flame gout. The creature breathes a 5-foot line of 60-foot long damage of 2d6 fire and 2d6 either necrotic or radiant damage, as well as setting combustible objects on fire in the area of effect.
It's got some yoga flame.
I figured if it was evil, then it could be used to set villages on fire and stuff like that. And if it was good,
it would set the bad guys on fire.
Right. You don't want them to be able to fly out of the way. That's not okay.
No, if it gets away, you got to breathe a line of fire on.
Exactly.
Sure. That sounds fun.
All right. So
that's the Razed Dead.
Right. Tell me about the Remnants.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and straight up say this is a nasty creature.
Okay.
This is the second nastiest creature that I have. It's not the biggest, but this is pretty nasty. Death isn't always the end, nor is destruction of those who have become undead so final. Sometimes evil is so stubborn, so driven, that its ties to the negative plane keep a form of it in existence. Remnants are the remains of powerful undead whose physical bodies were annihilated, yet their anger and hatred live on.
Okay.
So these were originally undead that were killed. So think of a lich,
right,
or a very powerful zombie lord, or a mummy.
Sure.
Or something else, right? More exotic. This is basically a storybook excuse to have the big bad evil guy live on after the player characters have destroyed it.
Okay.
And so it's going to be nasty. And if you're interested in bad guys becoming reoccurring villains,
we have an episode on that
called
The Bad Guy Gets Away.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about where it was created.
Sure.
First off, it could be anywhere, but I'm thinking particularly places where mighty creatures lived and died. So powerful dungeons, because you're going to find powerful undead.
Right.
Battlefields would be kind of cool. Maybe even a monster lair or the lair of a Dracolich.
Sure.
I could see a Dracolich coming back as a remnant.
The undead ire tyrants and Alhoons also.
Oh, yeah. Alhoons would be great. Yeah. Any of these types of lairs or places can be fine, suitable places where a remnant will appear.
Makes sense. What type of abilities does this thing have?
Well, it's going to have the base abilities of the creature with the following exceptions. First off, it's undead, obviously. It was already undead to start, so big whoop, right?
Right.
More specifically, it is non-physical. It is an incorporeal creature. Remnants are echoes of mighty creatures, but they are truly dissociated from reality and generally, and I say generally because there's other abilities, have no means to interact with the physical world.
Okay.
Now, that being said, they were once mighty creatures, and they still have all of their skills and class levels from what they were.
Okay.
That's going to suck for some creatures.
Sure.
Because if you're an undead ranger and you're incorporeal, you're not really doing a whole lot. If you kill the big bad evil guy and he's a sniper, he doesn't have a lot of sniping ability, or he's going to have to learn how to get a magic object that he can use.
Sure.
But
I always play with the argument that if a object can affect a creature, then a creature can affect that object.
okay, I'm cool with that.
So, like, if it takes a +3 weapon to hit him, that means he can use a +3 weapon because obviously it is physical to him. That's just how I run it.
So he just has to ball up the cash and sure.
Or steal it.
Yeah, he's got minions for that, right? Now, they do have some physical abilities,
Okay.
I might add. One of which is called Echo of Destruction. A remnant hates that it was destroyed, and as a standard action, it can redirect that anger into a form of an area attack, using the damage type of its original demise.
Interesting.
So think of a fireball, because that's the kind of damage it's going to do. It equates to a 20-foot radius of 8d6 damage, say for half, of whatever killed it. So if the lich was destroyed by a dagger to the skull, it's doing an 8d6 fireball of slashing damage.
Sure.
If the wizard hit it with a disintegration, guess what the kind of damage it's going to do, right? So
What is that, force damage?
I believe so, yes. So theme it appropriately.
Right.
I think this is very flavorful. It just does whatever damage originally destroyed it, which is kind of fun.
Makes sense.
And I would say the killing blow, right? If your player character...
It has to be the last damage it took.
That killing blow, or maybe the damage that did the toll.
I would also say if they physically destroyed the phylactery, then it's going to be whatever damage killed the phylactery, destroyed the phylactery, if it's a lich, obviously.
Sure. Now, in addition to that, it also has a fun rider ability, which I called Hated Rider. A remnant can bind itself more physically to reality by possessing a living creature or an object.
Nice.
And remember, it's incorporeal. Can't do much unless it, possesses something else. And by the way, this works as just like normal possession.
Right.
However, this corrupts the person or object and inflicts 1 point of con damage or 1 point of object damage per day. Ignores hardness, ignores healing. Bad times for whatever living creature is hosting it.
Sure.
This damage cannot be healed or fixed without the removal of the remnant. So it will eventually destroy the object. Unless he gets out.
Now, I was just wondering, could you theoretically use one of these to destroy an artifact?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think that would be a fun thing to maybe play in a game.
Yeah.
This remnant is literally infesting an object or an artifact that kept its soul bound and is slowly wearing it away over time.
Nice.
It is also bound by hatred, which is another ability. The remnant is bound to 1d6 objects within the immediate vicinity of its death. So when it is destroyed, whatever it happens to be, its soul kind of goes
Disperses.
into roll 1d6, and that's how many objects it's currently bound. It could be rocks, it could be some weapons, it could even be some objects of the player characters.
Sure.
Which would be hilarious. These objects are considered unholy and unhallowed and are often hidden by the surviving minions, and should be. If the hated objects are destroyed, the remnant can be annihilated permanently.
Nice.
And I would also note, one of these things would be an awesome patron for a warlock.
100%. It makes perfect sense for an undead warlock. Or even some types of fiendish warlocks.
Lots of fun, right?
Yeah.
Very nasty. Speaking of nasty, you have something slightly amusing. We're going a little bit on the crawling claw. What's a Sery Spy?
Here's my theory. If necromancers sometimes make purpose-created undead,
Sure.
we all know that there are things that you can do to get around scry spells, right? Like lead-lined rooms and all of that stuff. What if a necromancer took a crawling claw, bound an eye into a ring, and sewed an ear on the back of its hand, and used it as a physical spy to get into places that would otherwise block scrying.
Kind of like a homunculus,
Very similar.
but an undead one.
Yes.
That's neat. It's like Thing plus with an eye and an ear to it.
Yes.
I mean, I'd give him bat wings at that point too, just for and giggles.
I had a mental picture in my head that goes a lot like this. The description of the Sery Spy is the hand with an ear and an eye and a ring, right? They come in pairs, a left and a right. The object that the lich or necromancer looks through is the rest of the head, lacking the eye and the ears, but the mouth actually speaks with the voice of what the hand is hearing.
Oh, that's cool.
And the back of the skull has been replaced with a crystal that you can use as a crystal ball to see through the eyes.
He's got a television set, an undead television set. They're like remote drones.
And if you use both hands in concert, then you can actually use the dexterity of the hands to do things like pick locks if necessary.
And you get stereo.
Sure.
That's really cool. I think that'd be a fun thing to have.
And that's, to me, that's what I talk about when I say purpose-created undead.
Sure.
Because at first glance, it's going to appear to be a crawling claw. But at second glance, there's something very off about this undead creation. And when it skitters away from you instead of attacking you, that should put you on guard.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. I like that. I think it's very flavorful. Now, you've got also a bit of a rant about liches.
It's a slight rant. It's a mini rant. Once upon a time, long ago, liches were not just a catch-all arcane, like wizard or sorcerer. Oh, this is the only flavor you get. At one point in time, you also had archliches, which were good aligned casters who managed to go through the lich process and not lose their mind. This is a wonderful way to introduce intelligent, non-evil undead in your campaign. It's also a great way to have an undead warlock patron that
Isn't bad.
isn't bad.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So it frustrates me that that's something they got rid of. Also, once upon a time, there used to be divine liches.
Yeah, in fact, in the old versions, there was a lich could be either clerical version or arcane.
Right. That, to me, is missing. You could theoretically, it's terribly unlikely, but you could theoretically be a druid lich. And there are a couple of druid circles that would lean into that a little. The spore druid, right? You already make freaking spore zombies. It's not too much to think
That you become a spore zombie and just keep going?
right. If there's, let's say there's nobody to replace you to protect your area. You just do what you got to do, right? Like, you can choose to end it when somebody else shows up, but until then, this area still needs protecting.
That's kind of cool to think about, too.
And so I feel like I wish they would go back and touch on some of the other flavors and other options that are available, because it doesn't just give monster options, it gives story options.
Yeah, and that's where we're going with all of this is story options, too.
Can you imagine a druid lich as a warlock patron?
Undead Phalok.
Yeah, like I would allow some options for like cantrips and other flavor to play around with. We would definitely need to
Be a dark bend for a warlock patron, but I like that. That'd be fun. That's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, so it was a little mini rant that I wanted to go on because I feel like it is something that's missing.
I agree.
Now let's let's go someplace
Dark.
dark and awful.
Yeah, this is the last one here. We've come to Lost, the demiplane of Undeath.
All right.
So I figured, look, let's not just have some undead creatures. Let's have a demiplane of undeath.
Sure.
Deep within the ethereal plane lay many potential realities, offshoots of potential universes and what-if scenarios. Lurking like a tumor in the mists is Lost, the undead demiplane, the universe that failed to be.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of like the world that failed to be, but this is an entire universe, a demiplane that just didn't make it. Now, in terms of, you're thinking, well, what is the demiplane? And by the way, if you haven't seen our episode on demiplanes, go check it out.
Absolutely.
This one, in terms of environment, obviously the undead is the environment, and it can be predominantly encountered in the ethereal plane or the astral plane. Although I would say insidious portals kind of pop up throughout Orcus's domain as well.
Once again, you got a cult of people who just happen to be an undead cult, don't really know exactly what they're attached to. Things like that.
Yeah, a little tendril of Lost shows up and just messes with them. Yeah, so Lost is a demiplane of shattered reality where life itself becomes corrupted and other realities can become infected.
That sounds suboptimal.
It's awesome. So here's some fun environmental effects you can have if they go to the demiplane. First off, I'm thinking minor to major negative dominant, depending upon where.
Right.
I mean, it's an undead creature, the whole plane.
Right. So we've got minor, major, negative dominant.
Yes.
What are some of the other traits?
Well, it's got altered time. Living creatures age at a fantastic rate. For every hour spent on loss, roll a 1d4, and that'll determine how many years the creature ages.
Okay.
So it's at least aging 1 year an hour, up to 4 years an hour.
Awful.
Yeah. Do the same for undead spent on the plane, but it determines the abilities they get from their extended existence.
Sure.
So if you shove a vampire into the demiplane of undeath, a couple days later, he's going to come out a little more powerful than he showed up.
Right.
Corrupted flesh. Natural healing does not work on loss. Spells which heal, such as cure, have a 30% chance to harm instead.
So rope trick before you heal.
Yep.
And before you rest and before you do anything.
Okay, you've got the solution to all of this. Sure. I have an ability, pain and suffering. Creatures have disadvantage on saves against psychic damage or any mind-affecting spell, particularly those which cause pain or concentration loss.
Makes sense.
Because it's shattered reality, right? Yeah. It's undeath. Impermanence. Unattended objects either wither away into dust or are lost to the plane. Every hour an object is unattended, roll a 1d6. On a 1 to 4, nothing happens, right? It's just there.
Right.
On a 5, it turns to dust. Poof, gone. On a 6, it disappears. The plane itself steals it for its own nefarious purposes.
And if you think about that, that only makes sense. If you set, a bag of money on the ground and a year passes for every hour or 4 years passes, even if nobody came and stole it, it's going to disintegrate, right? The time passing is just going to eat it away.
Yeah, it's time still happening.
Right. It's open to the environment.
Yes.
And in this case, the environment is awful.
Undeath. Speaking of awfulness, any living creature that dies rises as an undead 1 round later. 1 round later. So it's like the fast zombie stuff, right?
Sure.
In terms of what kind of undead is it, determine that by the CR of the creature.
Dear Draco Wardens, remember to dismiss your Drake if they start to take damage.
Better not have that powerful paladin drop dead or your wizard might come back something you don't want. And finally, unreality nexus. At the center of the plane is a shard of complete unreality, the jagged tower. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is.
Okay.
Now, in terms of abilities of the plane, remember, that's just when you go to the plane of undeath.
Right. That's just being there.
That's just nasty. However, it is an undead creature, and it has specific abilities against other dimensions.
Okay.
Specifically, it can haunt dimensions. So, loss can haunt another reality.
Sure.
The demiplane of undeath can just show up on the prime material plane on a world, or the plane of fire, wherever the hell it wants to be, really.
Right.
When it does that, it can infect the plane, called planar infection. The appearance of loss corrupts the fabric of reality in its host plane. For 1d10 square miles around the appearance of the demiplane, vegetation withers, animals become corrupted, and undead are created easier and faster. This infection grows by 1d10 square miles per day and can only be stopped by removing loss from that reality. It's bad times when this demiplane of undeath shows up.
Sure. This is a great, undead cataclysm campaign.
Yeah, this is definitely like an elder evil type thing.
Right.
It can cause the destruction of a plane or demiplane.
Sure.
Let's talk about planar destruction. If the planar infection grows to 100 square miles, then reality itself around it begins to physically break down.
Okay.
Roll on the random plane chart in the DMG or the planar manuals and such for whatever various effects to changing gravity, changing time, changing elements, so long as you go with the negative ones. So no positive traits, basically.
Gotcha.
Time could slow down or speed up at random. You might have, earth, air, fire, water attributes. It's basically dissolving reality around it.
Right.
This only ends with the removal of loss or the planet's destruction. At which point, it's sated and then it returns into the ethereal plane and will pop up on a different world and destroy it.
Sure.
So this thing is kind of like a vampire, right? It latches on to a planet or a dimension, sucks it dry, destroys the world, pops back into the ether.
You know how sometimes my brain reacts in song? The world is a vampire?
Oh, nice. Little Smashing Pumpkins reference. I love that. Yeah.
So how do you get rid of this place?
This is a loose idea, but one must venture into the demiplane of undeath, loss, and cast Hallow on the jagged tower while surviving the elements of the plane. The jagged tower being that center of unreality.
Sure.
If cast successfully, loss returns to the ethereal plane, but the environmental effects from your world do not leave.
All right.
So you got to deal with that some other way.
Sure. You got to unravel the problem that started.
You want to toss somebody into the mix of a campaign? This is perfect. An undeath demiplane shows up, starts wrecking your world, and your characters have to level up quick to get rid of it. Better make a couple extra characters in case they die on the plane.
Sure. Things that can't be aged and things that are good against undead. That's really the way to go there.
Dragons. So there you have it. A couple of undead, an undead plane, as well as the means to create your own custom undead for your campaign. And hopefully we've given you some descriptions, some story ideas, and mo flavor to rock their world.
That's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for. Any questions or comments, you can hit us up at Goblin's Corner on Twitter. And of course, we're on all the social media channels. Do you like our show? We hope so. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite player, YouTube and Twitch.
If you could do us a favor and click the 5 stars or give us a review on iTunes or Podchaser. On YouTube, hit the like, the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. It helps grow our show and get us in front of more people, but most importantly, it feeds the hungry algorithm.
It's currently draining Matt and I of our time and blood. That algorithm, man.
It'll get you.
It's fiendish. That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name's Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks. In a world where the Goblin's Corner is by Matt Staples
and Eric Holden, show song by the mighty D20.
This has been a Subterranean production.
Coming soon.